Anyone guess who it was? It was indeed Matt. So if you come up and collect your delightful Lego prize. Thank you. I should get a photo of that later.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Treasurer.
Okay, and I'm going to hand over now to Paul Walk, who's going to take us through the Developer Challenge Show and Tell.
Okay. Hello? Sorry? Welcome to the Developer Challenge Show and Tell. The way this is run, essentially a number of developers have been working on a number of small projects over the last few days. And this morning they presented those projects, and a group of judges who are introducing the second judge here. We have the results. I'm going to announce the results in a moment. And then we're going to invite those people to present again to everyone. Okay, so first of all, I think I should thank the sponsors who put up a little prize for this. So we've got the University of Edinburgh, the DINA, Digital Preservation Coalition, and the Digital Coalition of Preservation as well. The Symplectic, Sustainable Software Institute, ePrints, and the Digital Curation Centre. So thank you to all those people for supporting this. Alex, who is there. Admini Ray Murray, who's sat next to her. Stuart Lewis, who's here at the front, and Paul Ward, who's standing here. I'd like to also thank the entrants, the people who entered this challenge, first of all for entering it and going for the spirit of it. But I think very much the spirit that we saw of operation developers working together. And as you'll see, there are even examples of people taking other developers' ideas and building on them during the course of these 2 days, which I think is very much in the spirit of the Repofringe Fringe in general, and very much what we want to see happening. Another important point was it was interesting how many of our entrants actually said that they'd rather not have a prize. They didn't want to feel they were doing this in order to win their prize, so they were doing it for other reasons. It wasn't just one of our developers who said that, I think it was 3 actually said this independently. So it gives us a sense of what, or at least what doesn't motivate people to join this. And I thought that was also good. But nonetheless, we have some prizes, and I didn't think people would be content with me to just take the stuff, so they ought to issue them. And we did discuss the entrance this morning, and we did a simple majority vote of those 4 judges. So I'm in a position to announce a winner and 2 runners-up. So the winning entry was from Russell Boyles. Smile for the camera. Very good. Good, that's 6 photos, isn't it? Yeah. Congratulations. Thank you very much for entering. We'll talk about the individual entries in a moment. People are going to present them anyway, so I'll just, before we get to that, I'll announce the 2 runners-up. And so we had four judges, so there was a majority vote for one of our entries, and 2 judges voted for 2 of the other entries, so we have even runners-up. And the first of those is Peter Murray Rust and Cesare Galini, who is Cesare here? Yeah? Right. You're going to have to share a prize, I'm afraid. So
Cesare can have a prize.
That's very sweet of you. So I'll just say a very brief word about those three entries. I think, as you'll see in a moment, we're going to invite them to come up and represent their ideas. But the winning entry was, I think, got the votes because it was seen as very timely, very focused on preservation, which is the theme of this Fringe this year. And also, some of the judges felt very strongly that it represented, in a sense, a kind of a call to action, something that they needed to actually start to consider and do, and laid out a started approach to that. The two runners-up, essentially, one of those projects has a very strong idea and has implemented it. It can show some executable code, which is always good in a developer challenge. And the other builds on top of that idea and actually implemented it into a repository system. So they're very complementary. And it was really good to see during the course of the challenge people building on each other's thinking. And I would also point out that the judging process this morning, we had all of the teams in the room together, and they were freely asking questions of each other and making suggestions. So it was extremely collaborative and cooperative type of activity. But without much further ado, I'd like to invite Russell, if you would, to come up and present more of the talk this morning, with all the patience and guidance as well.
Okay, so I'm Russell Boyatt from the University of Warwick, and one of the things I'm really interested in at the moment are MOOCs. So, if you've never heard of a MOOC before, they're these new breed of online courses that are appearing. There are a number of names in this area. You may have heard of them: Coursera, Udacity, edX, primarily American institutions who are developing platforms to launch online courses. Usually it's a collaboration of institutions who have built an environment where students can go online and watch videos, read online content, do quizzes, and interact with each other. And what happens is that for a large number of these MOOCs, there are a large number of students who are participating. So there's a lot of content which specific institutions have paid, in some cases, considerable amount of money to develop. And there's a lot of social media activity that surrounds these courses. So participants are blogging, they are tweeting, they are discussing the issues in that course in forums on these platforms. So what I've started to think about recently is, well, with all this activity going on, wouldn't it be great if we could capture that and if we could preserve that? And you start to think about, well, why do you want to do that? Well, there are a few reasons. One, institutional archive. So if an institution is sort of throwing all this kind of money into developing this content, you want to be able to save it in some way. You want to be able to hold on to that for future runs of that course, or to take that material which was designed for online and perhaps reuse it on a local level on your own campus. For students who've participated in that, they might want to review the material, look back at what they've done, and then the big thing is the future research. So MOOCs are a sort of change in element of the educational landscape, and there's not a lot of research that's been done in this area. And one of the things we really need is data on what students are doing, how they're doing it, but we need to hold on to that data because we'll need to answer questions in 5 years and be able to look back at what's happened. So we want to preserve MOOCs for all these kind of reasons. And the interesting thing from a repository point of view is that you've probably met some of the content that's being used in these courses. So certainly at Warwick, we're using our repository to assemble bits of content that will then get used in MOOCs. So if we're looking at archiving that MOOC, we've already got some of that content. So the MOOC preservation toolkit, which I have just started to build, and you can see a little bit of it in a minute, is the general idea is that I'm going to reach into some of these platforms, and certainly the easier ones are the open platforms, the ones that are open source that you're running yourself. Moodle, edX have released their source code, and there's another platform called OpenMOOC. And then we can use web scrapers to gather other material, to gather associated resources. We can do things like capture the social media interactions. So using the Twitter streaming API, we can sort of capture all the hashtag tweets. And then what we start to do is we say, right, we've got all this content, we've got all this activity, let's go see what we've already got in our repository. And then for all the things that we don't have, let's package that up. And that's what I've started to do, is try and build XML representations of that, and then let's go push it into a repository using Sword. So the general idea is platform, MOOC preservation toolkit pulls that out. Let's use Sword, push it into a repository like DSpace, and then we can do other things like visualization of what's gone on, or hold on to the data that's there for future use. So in terms of the social media, we can use Twitter streaming API. I've very helpfully been pointed at some work that Southampton have done in capturing Twitter tweets with e-prints. And I was involved in a FP7 project recently, which is building a kind of tool set for capturing and preserving blogs. So going out, grabbing blogs, storing it in some format that's useful. And we can capture all that data, preserve it in the repository alongside the learning resources. So all of this leads to learning resources that we've developed for the MOOC, capture that, store that in a repository. It gives us this kind of opportunity to start explicitly stating license information. So we can take that content, pull it into a repository, and then we can go through a kind of curation process, add in metadata, add in licensing information to make it useful to other people, both internally and perhaps externally, if you could kind of go this route of OER. So you could pull this content in and start thinking about how you could make that available in a sort of smaller packaged form. And the other thing is that by pulling the content out of these MOOC platforms, we're going to sort of pull them away from these very rapidly changing, rapidly developing MOOC platforms and put them into something that's perhaps a little bit more stable platform and stable formats. And then what we get at the end is we've got a kind of representation of the learning activity on that MOOC. So the thing that I have, I'm kind of in the midst of developing at the moment, is this MOOC preservation toolkit. So the thing that's prompted all of this is that in a few months' time I'm going to be involved in running a MOOC for computer science school teachers. So I've done step one, or I'm in the process of doing it. And now what I'm starting to do is look at extracting content from a MOOC platform. So I'm using Moodle for the MOOC that I'm involved in. And what I've got started to kind of put together is something where I can kind of pull out, and this is the bit that I've done already, is pulling out the discussions from that, and then I can start to think about transferring that. I can pull that out as an XML, and I can start to push into repository stored. If I push that button, it's all going to break, so I won't push it right now. But I promise you I'll try and get that working this weekend. But that's the general kind of step-by-step. And I'm not just kind of doing this as this is a tool, it might be useful to you. I want to state this as a bit of a call to action. There's a huge amount of activity going on around MOOCs at the moment. Much of it involves content that you may well have in your repositories. It would be really great if people could kind of think about what that means in terms of what content you've got, how that's being used in MOOCs, and how you're going to store information about how that's being used and grab the other content that's being used in a MOOC. Thank you very much.
Now, we're going to have to crack on.
Sorry.
We've got quite a few to fit in. So, each of you might go next. And what I suggest is if there are any very quick questions for Russell, if you can ask them while Peter's getting booked up.
Yeah, so I've thought about that, but not done anything about that yet. But yes, I mean, the idea is to preserve as much content from the MOOC as possible, so that the data would be as useful to future research as possible.
One last very quick. Yeah.
Great observation. I don't know if you're aware. The same team who we worked with on blog forever also did some work on Moodle and Print integration some years ago. How relevant it is to learn books, I don't know.
Okay, thank you, Russell. So next up, Peter and Cesare. We're going to have to do questions.
I'm very good on time. Oh, that's a lot. I hadn't planned to do a challenge when I got here, but I had my arm twisted, and Cesare gave me, the encouragement to go ahead. So we've been working over the last day on something which is going to change the way that images are used in scientific publication. Now, here's an image which is on Figshare. You all know Figshare, don't you? Yes, well, you'll know more about it when Mark's presented. Figshare is a great resource, but it's possible to take that image, use it elsewhere, and then claim it's your property, because there is nothing in the image that says that this is licensed as CC BY as it is on this. And as an example, I found that my work was stamped by Springer. My open access work was stamped by Springer, and Springer would charge people $60 for my things and claim copyright over them. And that made me mad, and so I blogged a lot, and Springer finally said it was a glitch. So they've removed the glitch. So can we make an image proof against what is called copy fraud, that is other people claiming ownership over that image? And the idea was therefore just to stamp that image in a way that could not be removed and was also immediately obvious to humans, right? So I blogged this today. Where's it gone? And you can read it on the blog. So it's very, very simple. You take the image like that. You take CC BY. You can read the BY there. And you take this image and you put it on top of the other image. And you will see a little CC BY actually in the image, which nobody can remove without destroying the image. They will remove the size or whatever it is. So we have a way of doing that. And if everybody in the world who produced scientific images stamped them CC BY in this manner, then we would have a huge amount of public information, as opposed to spending our time worrying ourselves sick whether we can use an image without somebody's copyright. Cesare is implementing this as a server. We'd hoped to get it done by the end of today, didn't we? Right. and so on. And I also want to say thank you very much to Chris, who's going to talk now, who's taken up the idea and applied it to repositories. So now we have a two-pronged approach. One, Mark is very keen on this. Ubiquity Press is also keen on it, and I'm going to the other open access publishers, and if they take it on board, then we could get to a stage quite soon where all open access images had CC BY stamped into the image, and that would change the way we thought about image as property. Chris is going to tell us about how he's taken that and applied it to repositories.
Thank you very much. So again, while Chris is plugging in,
Hi, would you consider creating a stamp like a watermark for video or video renderings that are used for scientific visualization?
Could it be done for videos? I think videos are probably less of a problem because videos normally say on the first splash page who made it, what the license is, and so on. So yes, somebody can take clips out of a video, but my life is too short to go through every frame of the video stamping it.
Well, VLC, I think, has an insert thing which used to process it quite cheaply.
Yeah, and in the context of scientific data visualization. So.
Well, it could be done, yes.
Mm.
We've just done it for static images.
okay, next up, Chris Guthridge.
I didn't want to sound didn't want to sound like an ingrate for saying I didn't want to win. It's more I'm already pretty motivated. What I'm demotivated by though is there's no young people chasing me and forcing me to be better because they're all hungry and disruptive. We're all getting old. Bring younger developers next year. There's not enough people under 25 here. It's not okay. Right. Okay. So nicking. There's an old computer science tradition called nicking stuff, and so I nicked Pete's idea. I actually heard someone talking about it yesterday, and that he wanted someone to work on it. I didn't actually tell him I was doing this, so he's like, "Oh, that was familiar." So we've got some vital data, as Peter's explained, that this is a vital piece of scientific data that we do not want to lose, and what I've done is I've built a short extension to ePrints with two changes. One, I've added an attribution text field to the document metadata. So C. Gutteridge, Southampton, or just C. Gutteridge is my attribution text. Pick a license, and I'll save that metadata. And what the plugin does is this is done by hand, but what we could theoretically do is have this automatic, so when someone uploaded an image, the raw version got filed away safely, and the public version automatically had this inserted, and it does basically Peter's thing, so you already know why that's cool. It's slightly different in as much as, there we go, we've got a second version there now, which looks like live demo. Hey! And put the text in there, and it put that over the top. Again, we've put the text over the top of the image so that it's hard to remove if evil publisher or someone is trying to scrub your license out. That makes it difficult. It's been pointed out that maybe you might want to be able to control the color or the location. I put a board around it to give it contrast on any background, but it's possible you put your vital bit of your science in the top right-hand corner. So the only other thing I've done, which I think is valuable, and I was just arguing with Peter earlier about whether or not it's worth the effort, is because we've got the data on license and attribution, and we have it to hand and we're already munging the image. So JPEG files and PDF files have, log into a computer, one of these, that will do. JPEGs and PDF files have a space for metadata in the file format, and JPEGs explicitly do have a metadata field for license and attribution. So if I download this, live demos, all very exciting. That was a bit too live. Oh, okay. I have to publish it, don't I? How does ePrints work? Okay. So, oh, is there? Is there one on the Mac?
I think there's one on the Mac. Just try it. It's on mine.
No.
Oh.
Arseweasels. Well, anyhow, embedded in the EXIF data in that image is also that metadata. So that if someone had scrubbed it out there, you've got a secondary thing that they'd have actually had to make a real effort to break your license. Okay, that's...
While Chris is disconnecting, questions for Chris. I'd like to invite Patrick or Richard to come up. We had 2 other entries. All of our entries were interesting. They all had value. Any questions for Chris in the meantime? I can vouch for the exit thing. We saw it this morning.
There is photographic evidence.
There is. Yes.
And I suppose just when is he going on the training course? I've been on that. Right, okay, so that was the plan. Right. Oh, okay.
Patrick Sweeney from University of Southampton.
Right. Hello folks, I have a bit of a fear of lecterns, which is a pain because I want to do a live demo. So the idea basically is that you've probably got some preservation concerns. I discovered that format preservation isn't actually as big a problem as I thought it was yesterday, which sort of upended this, this demo somewhat. But I still kind of care about it. So what I did is I wrote a little API which lets you... Dave Tarrant has a tool for ePrints which kind of inspired this, which goes through your repository and identifies your formats which are preservation risks. Now, the problem is you then have to have a mechanism of converting those into things which are less a preservation risk. And so this is a tool, it's a web API, you can post files to it, and you get back a URL for a download of that file, which is converted into a format of your choosing. So to demo, if I grab my handily planned publication here, and hopefully... So I'm going to take this, and it's Word doc currently, and convert it into an open office document. Good, that's sort of worked. Here we go, and I can, yeah, open with, sounds good. Bloody hell, open office, no, yes. Okay, cool. And so that Word document that would have been non-trivial to open on Linux is now visualized here as an open office document. But the smart people among you will have noticed, hang on, Patrick, you've just swapped one enormous preservation risk for another. So what I was playing with is you can actually also convert your Word doc into a HTML file. Now, this is native in browser. It doesn't, as you can see, it hasn't rendered quite the same, but this is raw HTML that you can take away, and now you don't need any special tools other than a web browser to open this, this document. And I think it's kind of cool. The HTML is a bit gross, to be honest, but you could do something to reflow this easily so that you could view it on a Kindle or what have you. The purpose of the service was kind of twofold, because I'm not just interested in preservation. EdShare, which is like my baby thing, well, it's kind of Matt's baby now, I disowned it. Yeah, does this stuff on server side to make previews, so it converts all the slides of PowerPoints and Word documents into images, so that you can display it in the browser. And you could also use this tool for creating a zip file of images of every page of your PDF or every page of your Word document or whatever. So, yeah, that's about it.
Vinservits.
I'd like to introduce Richard Vinservits.
Vinservits.
Whose name I also didn't have to pronounce before I took this job on, from Redeem.
Okay, thanks, Paul. I think Paul may have raised expectations here by saying that everyone had a couple of days to work on this. I kind of thought of this idea on the way home last night and spent about 3 hours on it total, so I'm not going to take too long to explain what I've done. From yesterday, listening to a lot of talks, people were complaining about the quality of metadata or the fact there was no metadata at all. And so walking home, I thought, well, there's usually a lot of metadata in the file if you can actually know where it is and extract it. So I went home and came up with a web service that will take eventually any file format you throw at it and extract as much metadata out as it can. At the moment, it's just using PDF Box and Apache Tika to get the obvious metadata that's encoded, but that can be extended to actually do text mining and identify entities within the documents, which can then be used to embellish metadata. Now, that was a great idea until I came in this morning and talked to Chris Gutteridge about it, and he said, oh, yeah, well, here's something one of the guys that worked with me 8 years ago did, and that kind of blew me out of the water a little bit. But I put the effort in, so I will give you a demo as to how it works. So this is just a web form at the moment, but in theory, you could post files to the service. And if I find a sample file, so this is just a PDF. If you submit it, it pulls the metadata out, gives it in a list, and also puts it into XML. So ideally, you wouldn't be using this interface, you would be using it as a web service, you'd post your file to it, you would get back either actual metadata or JSON, which you could then put into your workflow and carry on. This is just DC, but in theory you could put the metadata in any XML schema you wanted, schema with more fields, and you can actually then put more information in and enrich the metadata, where in a lot of cases, you'll get some metadata and you don't really want to use, I mean, the quality of this isn't great. The author is Carlos. That's not particularly useful. But in cases where you were just given lots of files with no metadata, in a lot of cases, any metadata, even if it isn't high quality, is better than nothing. So it gives you at least something to be able to work with. If only, I mean, I've not got it up there, but oh yeah, MIME type. So it'll give you the MIME type and you can then put that into your repository as metadata. So that's what I managed to do in about 3 hours. So.
Any questions for Richard at all? I'll go on first.
Do you know something about the, I think it's called the NZ metadata extractor? I think it pulls out metadata, preservation metadata from documents.
And that's built into Apache Tika.
It's built into?
The Apache Tika is one of the libraries that's behind this, and that's built into it.
Okay, I was wondering how that worked with it. Okay.
Yes, fine. Yeah. So Apache Tika is basically an umbrella for things like PDF Box, the NZ extractor, Droid, things like that. Okay. So this is essentially a front end for Apache Tika, but can be extended further.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
You didn't get blown out of the water. The really good idea here is actually making the generic API for lots of different file formats that gives you back structured information, and that's definitely not what that thing we never finished years ago did. All that did was text mined and had to go at finding the title. Really. Right. And it can find the title in a string that might be the author from a PDF document, but you could add the option. Do you want to do this from the metadata embedded, or do you want to text mine it, and it could still spit out very structured data? So no, I think it's neat.
Okay, good, thank you.
An observation I had was it was interesting that 4 out of the 5 entries were concerned with metadata embedded in the object itself. So it's not a new idea, but I noticed that none of the entries were really dealing with separate metadata records, which is kind of curious at a repositories event, given the way our systems generally work. And I just wondered if there's a little trend in evidence there of having another crack at that sort of notion of the metadata being in travelling with the object or being embedded in the object. I mean, Peter's and Chris's insertion of the metadata in pixel form is sort of an extreme version of that, but actually putting the metadata into the, whether it's EXIF or whatever. And I made an observation this morning that Apple, in their next operating system, are making a big effort to kind of surface that sort of metadata in the file system as part of the UI. So nothing new there, but maybe a new emphasis on it, Peter.
Yeah. Just to add on that, I recall actually quite a while ago when exactly that question was being asked, so when people were focusing on metadata, because we had what we called the catalogue record at one stage, but we were trying to work out whether it should be embedded in the object or a part, and that was a debate. And in some sense, the argument went that you ought to be able to handle metadata records separately. But it seems to me that's a second question. Because if you've got it embedded in the object, then you're doing cataloguing in publication, so to speak. You've got it in there. And if you want to have a separate record, then hey, you just extract it and manage it as a separate record and have the pointers. The second point I'd like to make is that in addition to extracting metadata from the object, an important matter, certainly for images, which doesn't have very much intrinsic content-like stuff about it, but it's more general, is one should be interested in associated documentation. And often that makes you think that you're not talking about a single object, but actually we're dealing with multi-part works. And perhaps in some sense, some of the documentation is intrinsic to the object. We're separated around rather than have it in as the code book or whatever it happens to be. But in extreme cases, one wants to go out and find something which is related, and then you mine that in order to extract and enhance the object in question. So I just wanted to sort of add that extra point.
Are there any other questions or observations for any of the entries that we've shown today? Okay, I'd like to thank all of our developers for entering and working in such a cooperative manner. So a round of applause for all of them. Right, we've got 10 minutes. And I'd like to just do something which isn't in the plan, really, but I'm going to make Nicola nervous for just a minute here. But I want to pick up on something Chris said about being concerned about well, basically, I guess, recognising everybody from last year and there being no new young developers showing him up for the old fart that he is now. I also, so I want to really put that as a question and wonder if it's something we can, as a community can do something about, because it seems to me to be, it's been a very important part of the repository Fringe and other related events that we have developers there doing things. A lot of good little ideas have been born out of those activities, and also equally importantly, a lot of relationships between developers or between developers and other people have been formed that way. And I'd hate to see that disappear. An observation I would make is that so many of our developers didn't want a prize and were even sort of faintly embarrassed about the whole idea of a prize. It makes me wonder if the notion of a challenge is a little bit dated now, and perhaps we should just move on from that. It's kind of served its purpose. What I saw that was valuable today wasn't people competing for a prize. Clearly they weren't, but I saw people picking up on each other's ideas and making suggestions and cooperating in that way. And so I wonder if perhaps if we do this again next year, which I hope that we do, continue to do developer activity at these events, we reframe it slightly. Patrick, did you have a point?
Yeah, do you want to, no.
I'm not even sure if it's on. I just being the Okay.
A developer challenge can still be a developer challenge. It's just not a developer competition, I think. Yeah, we kind of got those two muddled up at some point.
I think that's a very good point, actually, because another arrangement we have used in the past is to simply present a challenge to all the developers to work together and try to solve a problem, and that's a good model. Fractionally first.
The modern approach now is hackathons, and my idea came from Hack for Hack, which was run for weeks ago by PLOS and eLife and so on.
I'm conscious of the fact that hackathons are also an old idea now as well. A lot of people think of way too many, or they you don't get anything worthy out of them and that kind of thing. I think that one of the most valuable things to the community that we've lost this year is actually training opportunity for developers within the HE community. You know, DevAD hasn't run this year, and it's that kind of free developer training opportunity that's been missing, and having that critical mass of people who end up sitting together going, oh, there is something for that already. Oh, I want to use that. And it's just kind of rolling that back into the community is what the challenge is good at in the past, when you've got a critical mass. And I guess that people, we have to realise that and wonder how we're going to get that critical mass back, such that those visions and those hacks get realised and put back into practice as they have done. There's so much technology that's come out of the challenge that I can name off the top of my head, right, that is now impacting directly, right, in what people do on a day-to-day basis. And I don't think we should lose that. I think we should embrace it and move forward.
I would agree completely.
From my perspective, I think, especially young developers, the reason I say about young developers is that if you're not really sure of yourself and you're still trying to develop, it's any good. So you go back and you're like, right. And it's not, I mean, I've seen a few times with DevAD where twice it's got crazy bid, people doing it so easy for money. But that's £1,000 Microsoft that's actually worth skipping the entire event to winter, which defeats the point really. But I think being able to go back to your work and go, oh, you've been off a jolly? No, I won best, you know, and it's, and for someone like myself, Dave, Patrick, we don't, you know, match, we've won a lot of these, we were the ones who were inspired by winning, were really, felt validated by it, but now you want that experience for younger people who are coming up, and we should be the ones helping them up, not
I think that's a good point, and certainly there were, that was the original motivation with having the prizes, and I can point to actual examples of developers who went back to their institutions and actually got taken more seriously because they'd been given that prize, and they were taken more seriously in material ways, you know, given better facilities and so on. Russell.
I was going to say that when we did the presentations this morning, the comments that I had back, in fact, the one single word from Chris made me go, why didn't I think of that? And it was that kind of thing that would never have happened otherwise, but now I've got that kind of idea and it will change what I've done, but for the better. And we should pursue that kind of collaboration, whether it's challenge competition, but to find some way to share ideas and collaborate.
I think that's right, and that's exactly where the value is. Go on.
Well, I think that communication needs to go on not just at these events, but in what we do every day as developers. Lots of these things will be good just plugins to do to things that make things easier for people. And it's lots of those ideas that you have, you know, as a development team that's going on all the time. You think, oh, that would be cool. But would anybody else use that? Is it just me who's thinking that? Has somebody done that already? It's so hard to know in the community. Unless you're following it all the time on different things, what other people are doing that you could steal. Basically, as developers, we always like to steal stuff and take the little bits that are great and put them into our workflow.
Well, you couldn't have a better event if you just built that community.
Yeah.
Out there, right? That was kind of our whole point of having, let's not deny it, repository Fringe in the first week of August for a reason, right? And you know, that's part of the reason why I got so involved in the developer community as well, is this whole going out there and building these friendships because they last beyond the challenge.
There's a developer walking by there in the red.
Well, I'm concerned about the website.
It'll never catch up. Are there any final points anyone would like to make before we move into the final session?
Well, I'd just like to say one thing, which I think that last year when we had OR 2012 here, there was actually some concern around repository Fringe folk. The big show was coming to town, so as in repository Fringe, you know, as in Fringe, the official was something like that. And we blended that in and the rest of it. But I think we should all actually be delighted that we've come out on the other side. I say we, it's not actually me, certainly, it's many of my colleagues who made that work. And there's a commitment to that. And I think that what you were alluding to is that there is a intrinsic value to this mixed collar arrangement where t-shirts turn up with collars but not very many ties, so to speak. And you know, that allows this backwards and forwards. Now, if there is a particular problem, which is those who are coming through comp-sci schools or whatever it is they're coming into the junior ranks have not come here, then maybe that's just an obligation I think for the next year, given recovery back how they should engage.
think we need to draw this to a close. I'd like to make one final point and thank Muriel Mewison and Nicola Osborne, I think, did most of the heavy lifting to organise the Developers Challenge. So thank you to them.